and then he grabbed the ball, went into the goal. Everyone was around him and then quickly, threw the ball in the hoop.
He's really good at backhand, forehand, volleys especially.
We got past the keeper and then she took the shot and she scored a goal.
My mum is the best AFL player in the world. My hero is my dad.
My dad is the best tennis player.
What's going on?
She has lots of powers.
Long distance shooting.
Invisible. It goes in the hoop like magic. She goes to an underground base and gets her cape and equipment.
My dad's the ace master.
Oh man, that's amazing. Wow. Did you call me the ace master?
My dad's the best basketball player in the universe.
She never gives up, so that inspires me to do the same thing.
I hope I grow up like my mum.
My dad, he's the best I've ever seen, actually.
My super bum.
Yeah, you're allowed to applause. Wasn't that brilliant? Hi, I'm Stephen Bartos from ARACY. Some of you will have heard from me yesterday. The video we just played is the second of the videos from the Australian Sports Commission as part of their Play Sport Australia initiative, which aims to have more Australians, and particularly young Australians, play more sport more often. That one was called Heroes, which features children between the ages of 5 and 11 who talk about their favourite sporting heroes. And as you heard from the little girl who said, "My mum's the best AFL player in the world," the heroes are their parents, and the ASC knows that parents' examples can help participation in sport. And we suggest, if you're interested in more, just go to the Australian Sports Commission website. For those of you who've come to this conference for the first time today, because you've got a one-day enrolment or because you were just late, that's wonderful. We're glad that you're here. We had a welcome to country from a Wurundjeri elder yesterday, which was very heartfelt and warming, and we pay respects to the elders of the Wurundjeri people, past, present, and particularly, given the theme of this conference, their future elders, and aim to help their future elders become wonderful people, and we acknowledge their continuing custodianship of the land that we're on. We also pay respects to Aboriginal and Islander people and elders in the audience today. Our first speaker is the Commonwealth Minister for Education and Training, Simon Birmingham. He's been a Liberal Party Senator for South Australia since 2007. He's been Minister since 2015, previously served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Environment and then as Assistant Minister for Education and Training before taking up his post. Like myself, Minister was born and raised in Adelaide, grew up on his family's small property near Gawler, received his master's degree from University of Adelaide. He has had to cope with ups and downs in his life because he's a proud Adelaide Crows supporter. But they're doing pretty well at the moment, which is a plus for the Minister. He and his department have been strong supporters of this work on parent engagement and the whole of the parent engagement project that I outlined yesterday. They're providing backing not just for this conference, but for the extensive research work and network creation that alongside this event comprise that parent engagement project. It's therefore with special delight that I welcome Minister Simon Birmingham to this conference.
Thanks very much, Steve, for that warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the chance to be with you. What a wonderful video with which to start the day. Don't we all aspire to be called the Ace Master, as one of the young lads in that video described as parents, as teachers, as educators. I think there's no greater ambition than in a sense, that strong, positive endorsement that you have provided, such motivation to a young person. And can I pay tribute to Steve Moneghetti and the Australian Sports Commission for their engagement and participation in this conference and commitment to lifting and enhancing sports participation, but their recognition of sports participation as just one vehicle in which we can help to ensure Australia's children be their best, achieve their best and fulfil their potential. Can I too acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and all of Australia's Indigenous peoples? Particularly as Minister for Education and Training, I acknowledge that we continue to learn so much more of Indigenous culture and heritage, from Indigenous culture and heritage, and together as a nation to build upon that culture and heritage. I particularly acknowledge ARACY and the Smith family, the conference hosts here, who do, both of them, exceptional work. ARACY in establishing the Parent Engagement Network, in really building the profile of parent engagement through events such as this. The Smith family, with their contribution in so many ways that the Prime Minister and I were proud just a couple of months ago to acknowledge, to support with enhanced government funding through the Learning for Life program. The various peak parental bodies who are here today, the Australian Parents Council, the Australian Council of State School Organisations who are partnering with government support to refresh the Family Schools Partnership Framework and to develop materials to support learning at home, educators and parents. Other organisations such as Catholic School Parents Association who are undertaking research into effective parent engagement practices in primary and secondary schools around Australia. Those who have helped some of you to be here today, such as Good Start and the Ian Potter Foundation, I thank you for enhancing the accessibility of this conference to people who may not have otherwise been able to be here. And particularly, can I warmly welcome and acknowledge the many researchers who are participating in these proceedings, who are sharing their learnings and knowledge with all of you. The likes of Dr Heather Weiss, who created the Family Involvement Network of Educators, Jenny Brassington, the founding partner of the Centre for Active Family Engagement, Karen Mapp, who developed the dual capacity building framework for family school partnerships, Dr Debbie Pushor, whose research into parental engagement and leadership is leading, Bill Lucas, looking at how schools can enable parent engagement, and Dr Christy Goodwin, your conference dinner speaker tonight, researching parenting in the digital age. This wide range of organisations and researchers undertaking such targeted work into different features of parental engagement is a testament to the importance of parental engagement. I stand here today not only as the Federal Minister for Education and Training and a representative of the Australian Government, but, like so many of you, as a parent. In my case, a parent of 2 young girls aged 4 and 6, and also as a son, a grandson, a nephew, a neighbour and a former student. For we all bring with us a legacy of influence from our family networks, the impact of the so-called village that helps to raise and sustain us. Their example, the example of others, their encouragement and interest impressed upon me the value of education and gave me the motivation to make an effort and to seek challenging tasks. It is the example and encouragement of others that provides the resilience to persist, even when the learning is hard, the exams seem daunting, or the hurdles of life present disruption or failure. A part of the village is what gets most of us through, particularly the tough times. Yet sadly we know many children, many students don't fulfil their full potential. And from what many principals and teachers tell me, it seems in parts of our society some of these challenges are getting worse. In too many cases, educators are expected to fill the gap of parental disengagement or disinterest. If this conference is going to have a lasting impact, and if we're going to move from gesture politics to real policy action, then we need to keep the focus on what works, and indeed what doesn't. We need to identify the barriers, consider how these can be overcome, and appreciate both the capacities and limits of government action in this area, and of course the importance of collective societal action in parental engagement. Society must acknowledge that parental and family factors are not just some add-on to student success, but are at the core and centre of it. We've known this for a long time. And track research back to the 1966 US Coleman Report, highlighting the importance of the home environment in affecting education outcomes. The 1989 review of New South Wales schools, chaired by Sir John Carrick, himself a former education minister, got it right when it concluded that, and I quote, "The key to education is motivation at the parent's knee. The parent is the primary teacher. Schools help parents to educate their children." The New South Wales Education Act subsequently reflected this philosophy and clearly stated that the education of a child is primarily the responsibility of the child's parents. It's a principle that has been included in other state education acts. Through their parents, grandparents or carers, children can learn to value education, be motivated and engaged in learning, to be interested in books and reading, and to develop the social and behavioural skills they'll need later in life to flourish both inside and outside of the classroom. We know that parents have the greatest impact on a child's learning. We know that children have the best chance of success when their parents hold high, but reasonable and realistic, expectations of them, and when they provide a home environment that encourages and supports learning. We should not be surprised from this, because after all, approximately 86% of a child's life and time is spent outside of school, mainly at home. More recent research by Professor John Hattie has assigned over 50% of the responsibility for a student's achievement to outside school factors, including students' own abilities, personalities, as well as parental examples, behaviours, expectations and encouragement. Some have misinterpreted this research to suggest that somehow schools, teacher quality and government education and funding policies are less important. They're wrong. Schools, preschools and early learning environments are a critical part of teaching and learning, and can also play a critical role in helping parents to play a more effective role in their child's learning. Good teaching is important, critical for students and to help families to educate their children. Sometimes great teaching can even repair or overcome some of the damage done by a home environment of neglect or dysfunction. Schools can, of course, play a big role fostering appropriate behaviours in the classroom between students themselves and with teachers by creating an environment of learning, high expectations, well-being and resilience. However, the odds of student success are at their greatest, at their best, when home and school work hand in glove. The evidence shows that ideally schools and families work together as part of a continuum of learning. Schools can build on the foundations already learnt at home. Children do better when relationships are developed and maintained between home and school, and when the messages children receive are consistent, clear and motivating. Changing social trends, many of which were identified by reports such as the 1985 Carmel Report, and some of which have accelerated since, affected levels of parental responsibility or the extent of engagement with children in schools. These challenges include the growth in single-parent families, the time pressures in dual-income households, entrenched pockets of intergenerational welfare dependency, areas of drug or alcohol addiction, and struggles with mental health problems. Then there are, of course, modern-day mixed blessings of technology and the digital age, which create so many new opportunities, but equally present so many new challenges, especially for parents and educators. I'm sure that for many Australians, the recent research by Murdoch and Griffith universities on the detrimental effect of our children's mobile phone use is having on sleep, mental health and general well-being resonated strongly with people. Workforce changes, societal trends, different family constructs and technology have also changed the way engagement occurs. There is simply less time spent nowadays engaging at community clubs and events, and more time spent connecting by various social media platforms. These trends have variously put new strains on schools and teachers and on parents, as they are at times all expected to fill the gap or to teach around new distractions or intrusions. Schools can make a difference, but their influence has limits in the face of different social, cultural and individual factors, all of which again highlights the importance of helping parents, whatever their circumstances, to give their children the best start in life. With so many outside the school gate factors driving student performance, what is the role of government and government policy? Obviously, once children arrive in an environment of early learning, preschool or school, all governments have a responsibility to ensure that in education terms our systems are as good as they possibly can be. There must be high-quality educators and teachers working in schools with strong professional leadership and well-equipped classrooms, teaching a relevant, robust curriculum that wherever possible involves, engages and supports parents in their children's education. Of course, as the federal government neither runs schools nor employs teachers, so many of these matters are in the hands of states, different school systems and individual schools. But as the national government and the single largest contributor to school funding, we do have a key role to play. In addition to many reforms we have led over recent years in areas such as initial teacher education and the national curriculum, we have, through our Quality Schools package announced in last month's budget, provided for record levels of school funding and a model for enduring funding certainty that provides a strong basis for a quality education system. While supporting continued parental choice, we are equally committed to treating all schools and therefore all parents, children and families in government and non-government sectors consistently, fairly. Our new needs-based school funding model is a transparent and fair approach, and further, our funding seeks to ensure that it is tied to further school reforms to boost student results. We will be asking states and territories for greater transparency on spending and outcomes for the benefit of parents, taxpayers, but most importantly, children and students. All of these initiatives mean that parents will have a clearer and more transparent view of what's happening in their children's schooling, so they can amplify the learning in everyday situations and in conversations at home. That's why we're delighted that David Gonski has agreed to do a further report, making particular recommendations on the most effective teaching and learning strategies to reverse declining results and to raise the performance of all schools and all students of all capabilities across Australia. I strongly encourage you, particularly the parent bodies, to participate in this process. We want to hear those views. It would be remiss of me not to quickly mention the Learning Potential app, which our government launched in 2015, a tool to try to help busy parents with practical assistance on how to engage their children, featuring easy-to-read articles grouped by theme and by age. It's a resource that I know I've used in my household with my daughters, covering topics such as the top tips for years 4 to 6 for starting big school, or school refusal and what it is and how you can help, or learning in the teen brain, or of course, at the age range of my girls, the basics of literacy, numeracy and how to integrate that into cooking or gardening or those things that you undertake around the house. Learning Potential app has been recognised internationally, having won the education category of the Best Mobile Government Award, and of course the stall is here for all to be able to discuss that resource. We're also making it easier for parents to get more involved in their preschool-age child's learning of languages other than English. And there's no need for busy parents to have to brush up on their rusty high school French or Italian to do so. Our Early Learning Languages program, or ELA, allows children to learn the sounds and language concepts of Mandarin, Japanese, Indonesian, Spanish, Italian, Arabic or French, making the best use of technology in a positive way and providing new resources into preschool settings that actually help children develop these new capabilities. Teachers, schools, childhood educators cannot be expected to do all the heavy lifting in education. Ultimately, parents have a very big responsibility. No matter how busy we all are, how ill-prepared we sometimes feel for the task of parenting, there is, of course, no greater responsibility. That's why all of us engaged in education must ensure the best support is available for families, that they know that it is out there and how to use it. So many of the organisations participating in this event provide that helping hand to those families who need it most. And it's through those types of measures that we can ensure that we have more engaged parents, that although becoming a parent doesn't see you pick up a box that gives you the exact guide, although every circumstance is different, every child is different, every family's construct is different, and all of them come therefore with different challenges, the opportunity is there for us, based on good research, good sound practice and practical measures, to help schools, to help early educators, to help other health and welfare practitioners, to all of them collectively help families to achieve their best. I thank all of you for engaging in what is perhaps one of the most important discussions in education, parental engagement, where the greatest gains can be made, often at the least cost. And I really look forward to hearing some of the outcomes of your deliberations and hopefully having time for one or two quick questions today. Thanks so very much.
Put my glasses back on so I can see who's going to be asking a question. Just one or two, because the Minister has some media commitments, but who'd like to go first? Yep. This is always the tough bit. It's what I call the penguin moment. You know, penguins sit on the edge of the ice waiting for one to jump in case there's a leopard seal. So who's going to be the brave penguin?
I'm no leopard seal.
Over here. Oh, we've got one there and then one there. There's a travelling mic coming to you.
Could you tell me about the moves the government are making to get family engagement included in pre-service training?
Thanks so much. And we've got a comprehensive process of re-registration, re-accreditation for all initial teacher education programs happening as a part of our initial teacher reforms. And that absolutely is about achieving a range of different things, ensuring that best practice around areas of understanding of parental engagement, feedback loops for children, but also for parents and families are all included, as well as practical measures like ensuring that future primary school teaching graduates all graduate with a subject specialisation so that we get a greater depth of expertise and specialisation into our schools. But it's one of the really important sort of under the radar reforms that's been happening in terms of that process of going back each of the state teacher registration bodies as part of a national framework of reform into each of the universities and re-accrediting each of their programs to ensure that they are up to date.
Hi there. I just wondered if you could comment on parents who perhaps don't have the same view as schools and government about what needs to happen in schools and how government might take on their perspectives, like of diverse parents.
It's a very open question there as to, but obviously one of the great things about Australia and our schooling system is that we do provide a very great breadth of choice for parents. And the type of funding model and I only lightly touched on funding because it's not the core focus for a discussion today, but the type of funding model we support, which provides for parents who want to opt out of the government system more support for lower income communities, helps to enable that school choice to be a practical option for more families, not something that is exclusively the domain of those who are more well off. Importantly, schools have to, of course, be at the forefront of that engagement with parents. But also schools need to ensure that they are leading in the education and understanding of parents. That we do expect and should expect schools to take the best research, the best knowledge about how students learn, how to ensure students progress each year, that classic year's worth of learning for a year's worth of study, whatever the starting point of each student, and that schools build that understanding of their approach to that with their parents, that it's a two-way street. And so, yes, we empower school choice. Schools ought to listen to and be responsive to the needs, the concerns of their parents, but schools equally should be influencing the thinking of their parents about the appropriate types of learning strategies and approaches that can make the greatest difference for their children in their personal circumstances.
I told you it would happen. Once someone breaks the ice, there's hands everywhere. We'll be able to only take, I think, two more, and please make them quick. One here, one there.
In relation to the app, that's great for a portion of society. What other platforms does the government offer, or are you looking to do for parents who perhaps can't afford a mobile phone, can't afford internet access, or live in areas of Australia, metropolitan and regional? We're from WA, so we experience it widely with lack of access to internet and a whole range of other things. Those often low socio-economic families and those kids who need the help. So what other platforms are the government looking at offering?
There are a range of different approaches, starting of course from the earliest ages. We're undertaking a trial at present across what will be around a dozen locations of a Connected Beginnings program, bringing together health, welfare, education services from the very earliest years. It's built upon a model at a primary school in Perth, the Chalice program, that really is about how do you integrate all of those early years services, particularly targeting families and communities of disadvantage where they might be reaching out for greater support in certain areas, but where you can make sure that you've got the educational inputs put in alongside that in those early years as part of the preparation for school. Equally, in terms of resources, I'm always at pains to try to encourage people to think about some of the old-fashioned resources that are still available. If you're not a parent who feels confident in reading to your children or engaging in that way, reach out to your local library. There are good old-fashioned resources there that nowadays, of course, frequently have different programs that are available on the ground for people to attend, where you can sit as part of small groups and learn about those different reading and literacy practices that are so critical in the early years. So I think there are, of course, a whole range of different things. An app is just but one tool, and it can help, as I said, busy parents, but of course it also requires you to be sufficiently engaged in the first place to download it and to take a look at it, which is where, looking at some of the other areas of government service delivery, if we can inject education into those facets as well, it gives you a chance and a scope to focus the minds of parents in those early years that are so critical.
Now, I do apologise, sir, but there's a radio station that's about to melt down and we're getting the signal that the Minister has to go. So we actually will be really happy to pass on further questions through to the Minister, and there's representatives of his department here that we can maybe try and help you with. But in the meantime, can we all sincerely thank the Minister?
Thank you, everybody.
Our next speaker is Dr Debbie Pushor. She gave a workshop yesterday, so some of you have already seen Debbie, and she gave a terrific workshop. I'm also looking to see where she is. Just down here. Here we go. Yeah. We've got other people that way. Debbie's been very sensible. She doesn't want to have to walk all the way up to this end. That's wonderful. Debbie's professor in the Department of Curriculum Studies at University of Saskatchewan in Canada, and she researches parent engagement and leadership. In collaboration with the Parent Engagement Collective, she's published a couple of books, Portals of Promise, Transforming Beliefs and Practices Through a Curriculum of Parents, and a second book, Living as Map Makers, Charting a Course with Children Guided by Parent Knowledge. She puts parents as an important and central element in talking about schooling and education. And currently, she and the Parent Engagement Collaborative are creating a video series for parents and educators to present concepts from the two books in a different form, because as we all know, some people read and that's the way they learn, other people watch and that's the way they learn. Before introducing Debbie, a quick thank you. She's been travelling to talk in different states and territories around Australia, and we'd like to thank all the Catholic school parent bodies across Australia who've raised funds to contribute not only to Debbie's tours around the country, but also to her airfare to come to Australia in the first place. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in helping raise those funds. It's going to be an exciting and interesting presentation. Please welcome Debbie.
Good morning. Great to see everyone. It is wonderful to have many friends in the audience, to have so many supporters of parent engagement. I think that's just fabulous. I'm looking forward to making more friends during the next couple of days, to learning with and from you about your work with parent engagement as well. So thank you for the opportunity this morning to share some work that I've been doing, some research on parent knowledge. For me, it's a really critical piece of what parent engagement entails, and so it's great to have a bit of time this morning to look at that in more depth. What is parent knowledge? How do we hold and use that knowledge? What difference does it make to engaging parents in schools? I've got some Twitter addresses there, some Twitter handles, so feel free to use those today and through the conference. The graduate students that Stephen mentioned and I have been talking about the need to create a gentle revolution. We need our work to move out all over the world if we're going to transform schools into places that have a great place and voice for parents. So join us in that gentle revolution. A revolution expressed in care and concern and love for both teachers and parents and families. I want to read this quote to you. It was shared by a graduate student of mine, and I think it speaks to that really important place of parent knowledge. The moment a child is born, the mother is also born. She never existed before. The woman existed, but the mother, never. A mother is something absolutely new. I think that's true for a mother, it's true for a father as well. And we know that many people move into parenthood through adoption, through fostering, through all kinds of means. So that sense of becoming a parent for many of us is a really significant moment, a life-changing one. What I want to look at is that knowledge that we hold as individuals in the world, and then that knowledge that we hold as parents in the world. All of us, all individuals have funds of knowledge, but only a parent has parent knowledge. What I'm going to do in this session is explore that notion of funds of knowledge, an important one in the literature, and then also explore the notion of parent knowledge and where that fits into parent engagement. Let's begin with that notion of funds of knowledge. So Mal, Amonte, Neff, and Gonzalez have done some really important and significant work in the field about funds of knowledge. And they talk about funds of knowledge as those historically accumulated, culturally developed bodies of knowledge and skills essential for people to function in the world. So it's historical, it's knowledge garnered, gathered, earned, developed over a period of time. It's cultural because it depends where you were born, where you were raised, the kinds of experiences that you've had. So those funds of knowledge enable us to operate in the world. They're what makes us successful, what gives us the knowledge to do the work we do, to live the lives that we lead. When I look at their work, I think of it in this way. I look at it as personal practical knowledge. And so I've drawn some of my understanding of personal practical knowledge from the work, for example, of Freema Elbaz, who talks about practical knowledge in teacher education, from Polanyi's work, older work on personal knowledge, and then Clendenin and Connolly, who put those things together and talk about the personal practical knowledge we hold in the world. Again, as I said, our personal practical knowledge comes from where we were born, who our friends are, who our family is, what experiences we've had, the movies we've watched, the music we've listened to, the books we've read, the things we've done. All of that shapes our personal practical knowledge, how we make our place in the world. And then as well, we have professional or craft knowledge. I have craft knowledge in the field of education from my teacher education degrees, from being an educator in the world, from being a researcher. I have craft knowledge from things I like to do, right? From running, from cooking, from reading. Some of those things give me craft knowledge, things that are our hobbies, our passions, our interests. Laurie and I have a son who's currently learning to rock and ice climb. Definitely craft knowledge, some very specialized knowledge that he's developing in that area. So our funds of knowledge come from all of those kinds of sources. What's important to note, that it doesn't matter how old we are, we all have funds of knowledge. If we're 2, we have funds of knowledge. If we're 22, we have funds of knowledge. 82, we have funds of knowledge. Because we're alive and awake in the world, we garner that kind of knowledge. So teachers then have funds of knowledge about children, about teaching, and about learning. Parents too have knowledge about those very same things. Parents hold knowledge about teaching, learning, and children.
And then he grabbed the ball, went into the goal. Everyone was around him and then quickly, swirled the ball in the hoop.
He's really good at backhand, forehand, volleys especially.
We got past the keeper and then she took the shot and she scored a goal.
Yay! My mum is the best AFL player in the world. My hero is my dad. Our mum.
My dad is the best tennis player.
She has lots of powers. Long distance shooting. Invisible. It goes in the hoop like magic. She goes to her underground base and gets her kick. And then he grabbed the ball, went into the goal. Everyone was around him and then quickly, swirled the ball in the hoop.
He's really good at backhand, forehand, volleys especially.
We got past the keeper and then she took the shot and she scored a goal.
My mum is the best AFL player in the world. My hero is my dad. Our mum.
My dad is the best tennis player.
What's going on?
She has lots of powers. Long distance shooting. Invisible. It goes in the hoop like magic. She goes to her underground base and gets her kick and her equipment.
My dad's the ace master.
Oh man, that's amazing. Wow. Did you call me the ace master?
My dad's the best basketball player in the universe. She never gives up, so that inspires me to do the same thing.
I hope I grow up like my mum.
My dad, he's the best I've ever seen, actually.
My super bum.
Yeah, you're allowed to applause. Wasn't that brilliant? Hi, I'm Stephen Bartos from ARACY. Some of you will have heard from me yesterday. The video we just played is the second of the videos from the Australian Sports Commission as part of their Play Sport Australia initiative, which aims to have more Australians, and particularly young Australians, play more sport more often. That one was called Heroes, which features children between the ages of 5 and 11 who talk about their favourite sporting heroes. And as you heard from the little girl who said, "My mum's the best AFL player in the world," the heroes are their parents, and the ASC knows that parents' examples can help participation in sport. And we suggest, if you're interested in more, just go to the Australian Sports Commission website. For those of you who've come to this conference for the first time today because you've got a one-day enrolment or because you were just late, that's wonderful. We're glad that you're here. We had a welcome to country from a Wurundjeri elder yesterday, which was very heartfelt and warming, and we pay respects to the elders of the Wurundjeri people, past, present, and particularly, given the theme of this conference, their future elders, and aim to help their future elders become wonderful people. And we acknowledge their continuing custodianship of the land that we're on. We also pay respects to Aboriginal and Islander people and elders in the audience today. Our first speaker is the common...
Which is a really significant and really core piece. Parent knowledge is also bodied knowledge. When we're in a relationship with children, we are physically related to them in ways that teachers aren't, right? Life-sustaining processes like feeding, bathing, rocking, putting to sleep, all those kinds of things that we do, we're touching. The shared play, rocking children on our knee, playing piggyback with them, wrestling physically with them, as we stand side by side and do the dishes after a meal, as we do activities together as families. So we saw on some of those slides a dad, my nephew Dallas, dancing with his daughter at a family wedding. Those things are sensory. We know our children through touch, through holding them, caressing them, listening to them, talking with them. Again, it's a knowledge that's different than a teacher's knowledge. Teachers are cautioned about touching children and being physical with our kids more all the time. And so again, that piece of parent knowledge is distinct from teacher knowledge in the very physicality of it. And not only is it bodied, it's embodied, right? Sometimes we know things through our bodies, not just through our minds. That sense of gut instinct sometimes that we have with our children, that we just know that there's a way to do something. With our 3 boys, you learn that the way you respond to one is different than another, and sometimes it's your guts that tell you what the right response is. So that becomes another important way of knowing that's different than with teachers, because it develops through time and through contact. Again, something that parents have in a home with their children, smaller in number than the kind of numbers we have in our classrooms. And so again, that parent knowledge becomes distinct and different. Our parent knowledge is often intuitive as well. Sometimes we know it in our bodies, but sometimes we know it outside of our bodies as well. In his work, Stephen Jobs often talked about intuition, the important role of intuition in our knowing. And again, that sense that parents have. I remember a time when, again, with our first baby, I was a new mom figuring that out. And something just didn't seem right with Cohen one day. He wasn't running a temperature. He wasn't throwing up. There was no problem with any of his bodily functions, but something was wrong. I just had this sense. And when I called the public health nurse, she was beautiful and said to me, as a mother, you will know. No one knows your child the way you do. So if you think there's something wrong, then there probably is. Let's figure it out. So again, another sense of knowing through relationship, through time, through contact, that a parent develops about a child, that a teacher doesn't have that same opportunity to develop. We were talking about this in a session just not long ago in Brisbane. I had shared some clips of a parent and a teacher talking together about a child and asking about parent knowledge there. And one of the people in the audience, both a teacher and a father, right away said, well, parent knowledge is intimate. It's a different kind of knowing because of the intimacy of that knowing. Our homes are private places. Our schools are public places. And so the way that we know in our homes is so different. We share some of the most intimate moments of our lives. We're vulnerable there in ways that we're not vulnerable in other places. So again, we come to know our children and their vulnerabilities, their fears, their joys, their emotions, differently than other people in the world do. I have this vivid image of our son Cohen coming home one evening, early 20s, in tears. He'd broken up with his girlfriend. And he crawled into bed at our house, and he laid there, and he called me. And I laid beside him as he cried, and he talked about his girlfriend and what had happened. It gave me insight into him that no one else holds because of that special moment that we shared together. So again, parents, within this body of knowledge we hold about our children, have this very intimate sense of our children. Again, knowledge that teachers are probably never going to see in schools. And that knowledge changes, it shifts. It's never the same. Cohen, that day that he had that breakup with his girlfriend, isn't the Cohen that is my son today. He's different. Our family's changed, he's changed, circumstances have changed. Families are always in flux. And so what parents know, how they know their child, depends on a moment in time. We all have a storied history. We have a history with our children. We have a present, and we have an imagined or desired future. So in that sense, the knowledge, what we know, how we know it, flows backward and forward over that period of time. So what does this mean for parent engagement, for parent involvement? For me, I distinguish very carefully between those two conceptualizations. And parent involvement takes funds of knowledge. When we involve parents in our school, we're asking them to share their funds of knowledge, their personal and practical knowledge, perhaps their professional or their craft knowledge. It's the kinds of things people do when they organize for us, when they help us with a sausage sizzle, when they work at a fete or a carnival, when they're audience or spectators for kids' activities at school. Those kinds of things, often the kinds of things that we ask parents to do, only require capability, funds of knowledge, but not parent knowledge. I often refer to them as warm body activities. My sons are 26 and 2 of them are 23. They could do any of those kinds of things that we typically ask parents to do in schools without using any parent knowledge. They don't have parent knowledge. They aren't parents. So where we need to go, I believe, is to the place of parent engagement. For me, the difference between involvement and engagement is that with parent engagement, we're asking parents to share their parent knowledge. Not just their funds of knowledge, but their parent knowledge. That knowledge that's intimate, intuitive, bodied, embodied, the kinds of things that I've just run through. That deep, deep held knowledge about a child that no one else in the world has. When we're asking parents to come together with us to share that knowledge, to participate in decision-making, to contribute to curriculum, that's when we're moving to the place of parent engagement. When you look at this grandfather and his granddaughter, you can see the many things that he might know about her that none of us in this room would. That if she was beginning in a program for early childhood education, that the teacher wouldn't have the same knowledge of, even though that teacher has knowledge of children, of teaching and learning. Again, the history. What does she love? What makes her cry? What experiences has she had? Who's special in her life? What are her favorite books? How do you comfort her when she's frightened? Only the parent has that kind of knowledge to bring to that situation. What I'm going to do is share about a 5-minute video clip. Stephen had mentioned that we're working on some videos. I've got a bit of raw footage here that I'd like you to take a look at. I've got 3 parents or grandparents in this clip. Camille is a mom who had 1 son, and then she and her husband had 3 stillbirths, some really huge trauma in their lives, and weren't able to have more children of their own, and they adopted Joy and Will. In the clip that you're going to see, she's talking about Will. Will's been with them just for a couple of years at this point. And he came with a lot of trauma as well, a lot of challenges, and she and her husband and family are working hard with him. So I want you to listen and see what you hear of Camille's parent knowledge. The second part of the clip is an elder, Maria Linklater. She's a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a mother. She's a Cree woman, an Indigenous woman, and she's talking about an experience with a grandson who is grieving. And she shares some insights into that experience. The third one is Momina Hahn. She's a doctoral student of mine, a mother of 4 children. She and her husband are Pakistani-born. Her children are Canadian-born and raised, and she's talking about her sense and knowledge of them as they develop identity and live in kind of a hybrid world. So for all 3, I'm going to ask you, please, to be listening for, thinking about the parent knowledge you hear them express. When the clips are over, I'm going to ask you to talk about that with the people sitting beside you, and we'll do a little bit of interacting about what you saw, heard, and what difference you think that makes to the kind of work that we do in our schools.
I think by the time we get to our first parent conference in November, usually, that's way too late. There's months of problems, potential problems by then. I have made a habit of going the day before school opens or registration day, telling the teacher I need 15 or 20 minutes to talk about my child and let you know these are things that work for him. These are things that you really need to avoid. I think that has to be done at the beginning of the year, and actually now that I've done it quite a few years, it would not hurt to do a refresh in January after Christmas, because I think you start getting going and things are good and you kind of forget, oh, this child has some, challenges. I think parents have they know their kid the best. They see them all the time. They see kind of what triggers them or what causes these things to happen. And they also know what sometimes works and what doesn't. And I know one thing that I have learned year after year with my son is you cannot let him go to the bathroom during class. He uses that as a tactic to get out of his work, especially if it's hard, and he'll take a little tour around the school. He'll come back, maybe he'll have done something he shouldn't have in that time frame, and he is testing to see who's in charge here. Is it me? Is it the teacher? He loves to just make sure. So I tell the teacher at the beginning of the year, do not let him go to the bathroom during class. I will tell him that at home. You say no to him once, we've just killed that problem right off the hop. And that's been very effective. The teacher this year really took that on, and it's been super effective for him.
One of my little grandsons, he was so broken-hearted, just sobbing, and so we took him to an elder, for the elder to talk to him and spuds him. And then what happened was the elder finished doing the ceremony, so he went in his bag, he found a little wee tiny eagle feather this big. So he sewed that little eagle feather inside his cap and told him not to take it off, keep that hat on. So he went to school, and then he had that hat on, and the teacher asked him to take his hat off, and he didn't want to. So he didn't, he refused to. So and then they took him out, and then Then janitor came and just knocked his hat off. And then that's when he freaked out. He just jumped and he went running, he grabbed his hat. So right away we decided to call up a circle with the janitor and the teachers and who all witnessed to this incident. And so we told them that my grandson had went for counseling and that eagle feather was put there for a purpose and it shouldn't have been touched. And I felt that we didn't have to explain ourselves all the time. Like the teacher should have approached it in a different manner. Like even call us, like, hey, your grandson just want to take his hat off. Then I would have told him why, but instead they just took charge. So they all felt really, really sad about it, but still like it happened and the hurt was there. Everybody got hurt.
I think at times as a parent, I struggle, you know, I struggle as I see my kids struggling in terms of their identity, in terms of the struggle to integrate, to blend in, to be accepted by people, to be accepted by their friends, by the larger community. I'm raising my children in a totally different country, context, way, time, era than how I was raised or how my parents raised me. I have those values as a foundation, but sometimes I feel like I don't have any guidelines as a parent to follow because I'm learning, because this is all new to me, raising kids with multiple identities. I relate myself more to my homeland, where my roots are, where I was born, and the same way my children relate themselves to Canada. It's their home, it's their place, and that's why we need to honor parents' voice. We need to listen to them and to hear their perspective and their point of view, and it could help us transform our ways of thinking and our ways of practicing teaching and our ways of learning.
So what I'd like you to talk about, please, with the people sitting near you is what did you see or hear or observe in relation to Camille's parent knowledge, to Maria's knowledge, or to Momina's parent knowledge. So talk about the three situations first of all, and then move to that next question about how might a teacher in a school, in a classroom, use that parent knowledge alongside their own. We're not replacing teacher knowledge with parent knowledge, we're just bringing them together. How might a teacher use that parent knowledge in ways that are related to the teaching, to the learning, to the curriculum making of that specific classroom? We know that parent engagement in teaching and learning is what makes a difference in terms of students' outcomes. So we need to get to that place of learning. So that's the second piece I'd like you to chat about, please. Go ahead. I'm going to give you one more minute, please, and then I'll ask for your attention again. Thanks so much, everyone. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. If I could have your attention again. I absolutely love to hear that conversation. How exciting. I would have liked to be sitting with each of you to hear your words. There are mics on the floor. Can I have a couple of volunteers please begin? Penguins have already dropped over the edge, right, Stephen? So we're ready to rock and roll. Who has some comments about the parent knowledge they heard expressed? First of all, let's look at that first question. Thank you so much. The mic is coming to you.
Hello, thank you. A couple of cultural things came out of that for me. We were just discussing the feather, the child who was dealing with grief. You know, it's that shared responsibility. Did that family feel that they could share that prior knowledge with the school? Because that incident could have been avoided had they just made contact with the school and felt that that was an option. So I wonder whether that speaks volumes about how we open those doors and avenues of communication.
Yeah, you bet. And I'd love to turn it around because I don't want us to focus on how could that family, have reached out to the school. But if the school's working with a high percentage of Cree or Indigenous families, how is the school reaching out and ensuring that they know the culture and the traditions of that particular family?
And that kind of brings me on to my second comment. I work in a school where we're seeing an increasing number of particularly Chinese families.
Okay.
And we're very aware that the onus is on us now to understand more about Chinese culture, particularly if there's language barriers for parents. The children are often the bridge between home and school because they're, English language speakers. They identify with Australian culture, but they're going back into homes where the family culture is very strongly Mandarin or Cantonese speaking. And that is something we take very seriously at the school that I work in, that we need to kind of upskill quite significantly in terms of cultural understanding and cultural awareness. And if you take that on board in whatever organisation you're in, then exactly as you're saying, you're the one stepping in and saying, we're understanding you, we're reaching out to you, and maybe reaching out and saying, can you help us?
Yeah.
Because they've got the knowledge.
Well, in some of the work that I've done, I've talked about educators as guest hosts in a community that first were guests. And like when we travel anywhere new, it's our responsibility to learn about where we are, the culture, the customs, the ways of being and doing. And so how are we doing that as educators? I like that clip with Maria for a couple of reasons. I think we saw her cultural knowledge, which is part of her funds of knowledge. But I think we also saw a grandmother with parent knowledge of a grandson's grief, a very specific, more intimate piece of that, and those two pieces coming together. So often it's a complex combination of things at play. But you're right, I so agree with you. I think we have a lot of work to do in our cultural responsiveness with newcomer families and with our Indigenous families. Thank you for that comment, really important. It's hard to see in these lights. Way over there, I think we have.
Following on from that, it appears that parent engagement requires trust, and trust is a two-way street, so it begins and ends there, doesn't it? If you haven't got trust between two mutually consenting groups, then you don't have parent engagement.
Right. And so I see engagement, if we think about, I often have a visual with two gears meshing together, right? So no longer that hierarchy, which is parent involvement, where we as educators decide what needs to be done to serve our agenda, an agenda that we've decided on our own, but moving to that sense of two cogs of an organization, I guess, meshing together. Both contributing knowledge, both respectful, both relational. It's that kind of a piece. We're moving it side by side, no longer maintaining the hierarchy. That requires a lot from those of us who work in schools to shift our position, to shift our stance, to be someone else in the world of school than we typically are. So yeah, I agree that respect is mutual for sure. Thank you.
Just an observation, in New South Wales, parental knowledge seems to be valued in special education situations where we have regular conferencing between parents and school staff and counsellors and looking at what strategies do you use at home, but it doesn't seem to flow through to mainstream education, which is a bit of a...
I think we've done our best job of honouring parent knowledge with our families with special needs children. I think you're right about that. It's a leading area for us. Given the complexity, teachers have been more willing to say, I recognize these parents have knowledge that I don't have. But you're right. We don't see that necessarily in the mainstream piece of it, that we hold on to that role of teachers as expert, that professional is to be in control, to know. And how do we let go of that and say professional is to honor the knowledge that exists within the parents and within the family in order to enhance what we know. I was at the American Educational Research Association conference in New York City one time, and John Rabel had said, we have a whole community of untapped knowledge. Parent knowledge is different. I hope I've been able to show you the ways in which it is. How do we operate without that knowledge? When we're operating with just a piece of the knowing, and we have all of this other knowing, all of this other potential available to us, we know that we can do a better job. I know that you're concerned about your student achievement results in Australia just as we are in Canada. And yet we keep doing the same things over and over to try and enhance them. We refine our curriculum. We use different instructional strategies. We move more into literacy initiatives. And yet we have this expertise that we could take advantage of. Just want to close with a poem written by Momina. Again, thinking about the role of parent knowledge alongside teacher knowledge. Teacher of my child, we both need to know what we do.
And then he grabbed the ball, went into the goal. Everyone was around him and then quickly threw the ball in the hoop.
He's really good at backhand, forehand, volleys especially.
We got past the keeper and then she took the shot and she scored a goal.
My mum is the best AFL player in the world. My hero is my dad. Our mum.
My dad is the best tennis player.
What's going on?
She has lots of powers. Long distance shooting. Invisible. It goes in the hoop like magic. She goes to her underground base and gets her catering equipment.
My dad's the ace master.
Oh man, that's amazing. Wow. Did you call me the ace master?
My dad's the best basketball player in the universe. She never gives up, so that inspires me to do the same thing.
I hope I grow up like my mum.
My dad, he's the best I've ever seen, actually.
My super mum.
Yeah, you're allowed to applause. Wasn't that brilliant? Hi, I'm Stephen Bartos from ARACY. Some of you will have heard from me yesterday. The video we just played is the second of the videos from the Australian Sports Commission as part of their Play Sport Australia initiative, which aims to have more Australians, and particularly young Australians, play more sport more often. That one was called Heroes, which features children between the ages of 5 and 11 who talk about their favourite sporting heroes. And as you heard from the little girl who said, "My mum's the best AFL player in the world," the heroes are their parents, and the ASC knows that parents' examples can help participation in sport. And we suggest, if you're interested in more, just go to the Australian Sports Commission website. For those of you who've come to this conference for the first time today because you've got a one-day enrolment or because you were just late, that's wonderful. We're glad that you're here. We had a welcome to country from a Wurundjeri elder yesterday, which was very heartfelt and warming, and we pay respects to the elders of the Wurundjeri people, past, present, and particularly, given the theme of this conference, their future elders, and aim to help their future elders become wonderful people. And we acknowledge their continuing custodianship of the land that we're on. We also pay respects to Aboriginal and Islander people and elders in the audience today. World Athletic Championships, he's got a wheelbarrow full of medals. He was Mayor of the Commonwealth Games Village at Melbourne in 2006. He's been awarded the Order of Australia and so many other things besides that I could spend the rest of the morning and you wouldn't get to hear him. So I'd like to introduce someone who continues to give back to sport and to the Australian community as a board member of our gold sponsor, the Australian Sports Commission. Please welcome Steve Moneghetti.
Wow, great to be here. Debbie, fantastic. I'm a parent and a teacher. I'm not sure which I am in that context, but I certainly enjoyed your presentation. Great to see so many people here. Your presentation was had some slides and some really vital information. Mine's we're going to go for a run for 2 hours. Is that no, I'm only kidding. It's a nice way to start. It always scares them, Stephen, so I promise I won't. I'll take it easy on you. But terrific to be here and delighted to present it on behalf of the Sports Commission, of which I'm a board member. I'm also, I do a bit of running, obviously, but I did an engineering degree and a teaching diploma and chaired a review here in this state looking at physical and sport education and become known. I love a long title because it was such a long title it ended up becoming known as the Moneghetti Report. So that was a good outcome for me and certainly made a difference, certainly I think to the way physical and sport education was taught within this state, and some of those implications are still being felt today. But more importantly, I'm a husband and a father of 4 children, and proudly so. Interestingly, we started the day with that video that, what a fantastic video, and I look at that and I'm inspired by the stories and the simple nature of those stories where parents are heroes to their children. And my parents, who are unfortunately still alive, were certainly heroes to me, and instantly my involvement in sport was from my dad. Dad worked on the Shire of Ballarat and he noticed that I was doing a little bit of running around at home and took me down to Little Athletics in Ballarat. So that was my first introduction to the life pursuit that running has become for me. And then I remember I was selected to represent Victoria at the National Cross Country Championships in WA in Perth. And it was a couple of pages. The first page was all about being selected, and I was pretty excited about that. And the second page was going to cost about $500. I didn't read that page, but that's for parents to read. So off I went, and we stayed at a nice hotel and flew over to Perth for that competition. My mum and dad at the time were in their 50s, had never been on a plane before in their lives. And I think the only time we'd been outside of Victoria was when we'd go for holidays up to Echuca, and then we'd cross the border, and we'd all get out of the car and we'd have that photo in front of the obligatory sign, "You are in New South Wales," and we'd jump back in the car and drive back into Victoria. So it's an anecdote and it's humorous, but it's interesting because it's shows the value of and the sacrifices that my parents made to allow me to take advantage of those opportunities that I had. And that's what we do as parents. That's our lot. And I'm sure they've got lots of positive reinforcement in being able to follow my career. They didn't know that at the time. And we don't know that at the time. We don't know the decisions we make today in relation to our children. We don't know the consequences of those in 10, 15 years' time. So we take a risk, and it's that risk reward. And I'm sure the rewards you get will far outweigh the risk that you're taking today, but we don't know that, and I admire you for taking those risks. I think, we talk about the Sports Commission, and what are we doing? We've got two branches. We look at excellence in sport, and the second branch is participation. And we focus mainly on youth and younger people. And the facts present themselves at this point in time that 1 in 3 children and 1 in 10 younger people don't exercise as much as we would like them to. 25% of the population, of our children's population, are obese or overweight, and 77% actually exceed the 2-hour limit of screen time per day. So they're pretty damning figures, and only 50% of our children are involved in some formalised sport. So what are we doing? Well, we're trying to support you. We understand, we want to get the message across of the positive outcome in the whole of a child's development being involved in sport. And I like to think of the 3 Fs. It's easy. I'm a very simple man. It's easy to remember. Fun, fitness and friendship. And I embody those. The reason I still run today is because I love what I do. I certainly get a health benefit out of it. And most importantly, I develop lifelong friendships. And sport gives us the opportunity to do that. When you think about those figures, you think, okay, so what are we doing? What are we doing to support you as parents and guardians to make sure that your children are engaged in sport? And the best one, I think the best example at the moment is our Sport in Schools program. And many of you would be familiar with that. 5,700 schools engaged in that program nationally, and over 300,000 students that are involved. And that is a wonderful, wonderful outcome. And we're seeing that grow exponentially every term. So that's a great outcome for us. And one principal, I'd like to quote a principal who's been involved in that program, and that principal said, "The value of the Sport in Schools program goes way beyond sport. The sports program engages the students, and an engaged student is one that's far easier to teach." And I think, that shows not only the physical benefits, but the emotional and mental benefits that sport can have on a person's education. And I think we'd all agree that an active and healthy student is one who learns and develops a lot more skills at the end of their schooling life. So we really support that. What else are we doing to support you? We're doing research. So our AusPlay surveys, and many of you will have seen those recently, with the figures coming out for different participation, different sports, and the numbers of children and younger people involved in those sports. So the AusPlay survey, we're also partnering with universities to look at data on involvement of children in sport, doing some research. So that research will hopefully filter down to your parenting, but also the schools at which your children attend. What else are we doing? Well, we're looking at some advocacy and policy development as well. And you think about physical literacy. What is physical literacy? We're trying to develop some measures so that when your child does involve themselves in phys ed and sport, we have some measures as to their progress. We give you some feedback. Imagine going to those parent-teacher interviews and you sit there and often you know, the sports teacher goes, yeah, well, what's your son or daughter? That's right, and yet they look down and they go, oh yes, there's been certainly an improvement in the throwing skills or the catching skills, and your son or daughter at the beginning of this semester or this term was a 5 on our scale for catching, but now they've progressed to a 6, and that's a real development. So those measures, and we think, why shouldn't we have those in sport and phys ed? Okay, so that physical literacy is a really important program in our eyes to seeing that measurable development of your children in the classroom environment. What else are we doing? We're looking at programs. Certainly I think you will have realised the recent announcement by our Sports Minister, the Honourable Greg Hunt, who has released a national sports plan. We actually want your involvement in that sports plan. So your input is really important to us. Why don't you get on the website, sport.gov.au, and give us some feedback as to what we should do to improve that the way sport is rolled out in this country. We're also looking at the Sport in Schools Workforce Project, which is the way we deliver that sport in schools. So lots of community connections with the sports. So a lot of sports that have modified games. I'm sure you'd be familiar with a lot of the hot shots, mini-roos, the different modified sports. And those sports come into your school environment. And what is the educational support? What's the knowledge base for that workforce? So we're making sure that the coaches and the people from those community sporting associations are well versed and well trained to appropriately deliver that program. So, you know, those types of programs we see as being vitally important. We know we want to engage, we want to support you. It is a team effort. It's a changing landscape out there at the moment, and we really need to work together to make sure that we are engaging with your children in sport to get the benefits that they can. We are a sporting nation, we know that, and it's a way we deliver that at a participation level that we'll continue to see that thrive. I want to give you some examples in my own situation. I spoke about my parents. My mum, never all that keen on me playing AFL. I'm not sure, I'm such a big man mountain, I don't know why she was worried about me, but she was always worried about me, and I remember finishing and deciding that I was probably going to go running, and she was very happy, my mum, when I made the decision to be a runner rather than a footy player. Anyway, a few months later, I remember I was burrowing through the glove box in our car, and I saw this pad and I thought, oh, I wonder what all that is. And I opened this pad, and my mum had been taking statistics of my performance at every football match I'd played for about the last 4 years. Something I was completely oblivious to, never ever imagined that. I thought Mum was just sitting there, you know, worrying about my health and well-being, but she was actually really following the game and taking an analysis of my performance. So that's, you know, one of those subtle things that your parents may have been doing just in the way that they supported you along the way. Then my own daughter, our eldest daughter, I remember at our school, and was the first time I'd wandered down to the school sports, and sitting at the finish of the 100-metre line with a few other parents, and all these parents are shaking their head, and I could just see they wanted to engage and have conversation with me, and so sort of gave them the eyes back, and up they came and they said, oh, you wouldn't believe it, would you? I said, oh, well, it's fine weather, it's great, you know, we're here, sport, normally it's called off, so we're lucky we've got a great day, we'll be able to have the sports carnival. Oh, no, it's not that, that's not the problem. Oh, there's an issue. Yeah, I knew it. Our daughter is in the same race as your daughter. And I thought, oh my God, this is what Emma's going to have to put up with for the next 20 years. We're not even sprinters, as you know. We're not fast, we're slow. So she was nowhere in the 100 metres, but there was this expectation that because she was Steve Moneghetti's daughter, she was going to be the most successful and the first person across the finish line. So therein lies sometimes it's good to be a Moneghetti, sometimes it's not so good, but it just opened my eyes instantly to that pressure and expectation that would be on my daughter. And to be perfectly honest, she wasn't a person who was successful in sport. She stayed involved. She's at uni now, plays in the mixed netball side for her university, and as well as that, works part-time at Tennis Australia. So she has a really direct involvement. She loves her sport. And I am convinced that that engagement in sport for her came through my support of her in my sporting role, but most importantly as a parent. And you know, how proud does that make me? Then finally, I'll just give you an example. Last night, and I mentioned this to a couple of people I was talking to this morning. Last night, I went to a fun run at a specialist school in Ballarat. We've got a great specialist school in Ballarat, and I always go to the fun run and run around and have a bit of an engagement and chat with the kids. And we finished that, and one of the teachers came up and said, look, we've got a couple of kids who actually run pretty well. Would it be possible for them to come and train with you, maybe outside of the school environment? And I said, oh yeah, sure. So Tuesday night we run a consistent night around Lake Wendouree, meet over the boat shed. So I said, come along. Anyway, last night was the first night that this young boy with special needs came along. And would you believe he was very excited, very excited. He got there so early, he missed us warming up. He actually warmed up with another group. That's how keen he was. So can't fault his enthusiasm. Anyway, he came back and we got chatting, and we decided we were going to do, I've got a son, 16, so I palled him up and we ran together and we did a session around Lake Wendouree. And initially, all he wanted to do was talk about me. Me. Steve, been to the Olympics. Wow, I must be going. I said, look, you're going to get very puffed if you keep talking. Just focus on the session we're doing. Take this seriously. And he did a great job. He did a fantastic job. And we got to the end of that lap, and I think he ran about 3 minutes quicker than he'd ever ran for Lake Wendouree before. So he actually went really well. And his father was there. And his father had brought him, and his father waited around. It took us about an hour to do all of this session. And I went up, and so I high-fived Braden when we finished, and then I went over to his dad and I said, you should be really proud of Braden today. He did a fantastic job. His first time along, and he got through. I thought he was going to get tired. He hung in there and did a really good job. You should have seen the eyes light up on that parent. And then he looked across to Braden, and gee, you could not put a price on that eye contact that those two made as father and son. It was priceless. And I suddenly realised that I thought I was the one making the big effort to help out Braden. You know, I got such a great feeling out of that because I'd seen a father and a son engage in a really special moment. And they are priceless moments. And they're the things I get to benefit because of my involvement in sport. That little gesture to have that boy involved was such a positive outcome, not only for him and his dad, but for me. And that's why I love what I do. I'm fortunate to be involved in sport and will always be involved in sport. We do need a united approach as parents, as community members. It's a changing landscape. We've got lots of forces working with us and against us. Lots of choices to be made, both for us as parents and with our children. Let's work together to make sure that we continue that whole life experience that sport allows them to have. Thanks very much.
I'm just looking for a signal from Kelly whether we can take a few minutes for observations. We can indeed, thank you. Kelly from ARACY has been the conference organiser, and hasn't she done a brilliant job? We'll thank her properly at the end. So we can have any either questions or even comments that you'd like to make. The minister's had to leave us, but if you wanted to make a comment about what the minister said, that would be fine. If you wanted to ask a question to either Steve or Debbie, please do so. So over to you for the next 10 minutes before we break for morning tea. And maybe I can invite Steve and Debbie up to the stage to sit here. We have lovely audio-visual people who'll come and give you a microphone if you haven't been mic'd up already. And who's going to ask the first question? Who's our brave penguin for this session? One over there. Good.
Thank you. My question's for Debbie, please. Sorry, I'm just here. I work in a cluster of primary schools who are really interested in teacher outreach and enabling teachers to enact family engagement, but it comes, it's quite obviously you'll be aware, a very key skill, and so I'm just interested in your opinion on preparing teachers for that work.
The microphone is coming along.
Thanks so much for the question. I always say in regard to this one, I'd love to be in charge of the world, because I think that we need coursework in every teacher education program in the world about working with parents, right? We would never put teachers... We would never put teachers in classrooms who didn't have math methods classes, who didn't have English language arts methods, and yet one of the first things teachers do is work with parents, and we give them no preparation for it. Teachers tell me over and over that they're afraid of parents. Parents tell me they're afraid of teachers too, but it's because we don't have the knowledge or the skills to do that work. And I think it's critical. If we could change something, I think there should be a requirement for coursework on parent engagement in our teacher certification across Australia, Canada, the world. I think that's what's needed. And I think then we have to continue it with in-service work as well.
Just on that, Stephen, two things I overarch in everything that I do, all groups I come across. I think two things I think rule the world: relationships and communication. Form a relationship and then have really good dialogue, and that for me that's come through in everything we've been chatting about today. And if you don't have those two, then that's when the cracks appear.
And someone else. You'll have to put your hand up quite high. There we go.
This is another question for Debbie, and I just wanted to know, from a teacher's perspective, but also from a parent's perspective, how much should we be sharing? How do we know when to stop sharing, and how much information should be shared?
That's probably very particular and contextual, but I think, if we can ask ourselves, does it benefit the child? Is this sharing of information important in order for us to do a good job with the child's teaching and learning? And if the answer is yes, it's of benefit, then I think it's important. I know that parents often say, I don't want to take a teacher's time. And we have to change that understanding of our work together, I believe, so that we see that exchange of information as integral to what we do, not a burden or an extra or something else, right? So if we believe that kind of communication is important, how do we build it into the daily lives of teachers? And I think they would value it if they, again, it was an integral part and they had time to engage.
And one down and along the corridor here. Oh no, over there first, and then here, and that will probably exhaust our question time.
Sorry, Debbie, you're the lady of the moment. My question is, if you've experienced a bit of a them and us culture in a school, and this is a generalisation, so I'm not saying that's for everybody, but where there's the parents, as in the parents, and the teachers, how would you initiate some cultural change in that school?
Thanks for your question. The very core of this work is examining our beliefs and assumptions. And so again, I think it comes back, if we're looking at teachers, to doing some really important teacher development work on beliefs about parents and families, assumptions about parents and families, challenging those, unpacking them in order to perhaps re-educate or continue to educate teachers in relation to their work with parents. I think at your P&Cs and your P&Fs, you can do that same kind of work as parents to examine beliefs and assumptions, how you're relating, and again, that process is important in that location as well. but really to look at how we want to live and work together in relation to student learning is a really key discussion that often we don't have. It's an invisible conversation.
Thanks. Steve, I've got a question for you about the changing face of kids in sport and whether through the Sports Commission you see, we hear all the time in the media about we don't score now for kids' teams because we don't want someone to lose. A story about a club not being able to sing the team song because they're worried about offending, you know, the team that didn't win on the day. And those changing, I'm going to say, ridiculous expectations that someone didn't come first, second or third. Do you see a shift in that, and what do you think's behind it, and what is really your opinion on it? Because in my day, people lost and it was okay because we just enjoyed the participation.
Yeah, it's a great, you know, interestingly on the Sports Commission we've got a mix of successful sports people and people who haven't been involved at the elite level, and normally, would you believe, it's the elite sports people who are, don't be too big on competition, it's all about enjoying, and then it's the other, but no, we've got to have winners, you know, we're all about, you know. So it's a really interesting conversation. There's no doubt that filters down. We reflect what society tells us, and at the moment, I'm actually seeing a bit of a shift, to be honest. And you're obviously going to get my opinion on, you know, we need to set targets, we need to have challenges, and you know, I think we've gone so far the other way that now I'm noticing a real shift. And you know, I spoke about the physical literacy. You know, I'm a really strong believer in, and I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, but I understand that we need to be able to have specialist phys ed teachers and trained people so that we actually get, not supervision, we actually get teaching. And teaching of skills, you know, our fundamental motor skills are really lacking, and we need to just get, and you probably know the stat that girls at 13 or 14 disengage in sport because they didn't get the fundamental motor skills before the age of 4. Okay, so if you lost it, what you haven't got by 4, then you are going to disengage with sport at secondary school for females. And, you know, we need to understand that and reflect that. That's a fact. I know that. I see it. I don't need a study to tell me that. I see that. So we need to address that. That's fact. We all know it. Everyone's nodding. There's no doubt about it. So what do we do to address that? So for me, it's, you know, really trying to get the school system understanding that. Just one important thing. We've spoken a lot about parents and we've spoken a lot about teachers. You know what the conduit is in between? Kids. Yeah, don't ever lose sight that that's what it's about. And interesting, I'm a parent and teacher. When the school rings, I worry. I think, oh God, what's my kid done? I'm sure as a teacher, when a parent rings, I go, oh God, what have I done to their kid? and yet I think of the outcome of that, and Debbie, and what we've been talking about today, if my child communicated, they don't need to ring. So I know there's not an issue. We've got great communication. We understand. We went over what they did today. So there's never that scared phone call because there's open, strong communication.
What a wonderful note to finish on. Thanks to both Debbie and Steve. We will be taking a break. Do you know where you're going next for your concurrent session? If you have looked at your conference app, you will know. If you haven't looked at your conference app, you'll end up in a broom closet. Look at your conference app, find out where your next session is, get yourself ready for it. Before we break for our morning tea, again, let's thank our speakers and let's break.